Good morning, everybody, for another rendition, of course, of Mindset Monday. I am Stephen Jarrett. I've got Tena, Michael, and a group of individuals on this call with us this morning. And today's real true conversation centers on the idea of that first impression, the concept of 6 to 8 seconds, not 6, 7. Don't get it confused. My young 8-year-old son would love the fact that I almost said that. But in reality, this is something that was trained to me over a decade ago. I was in a corporate training with Verizon, and one of the pieces that they really centered on was executive presence. And they really broke it down for us in multiple different ways. And part of when I was writing this was going back to some of those old statements, some of my notes, including some of the different studies that were utilized back then. So if there are some studies I'm going to reference here that might be a decade plus years old, right? But it still holds true to the weight that we are going to discuss it today. And that's the idea that you really win someone over, right, in that 6 to 8 seconds. Now, some will argue that that is in milliseconds, that people make decisions just strictly the way that you carry yourself, your aura, the way you dress, how your hair is, whether or not you have certain, tattoos, piercings, all those different things all come into play, of course. And we would love to say that none of us have any biases, but that's just, unfortunately, it's just not true, right? In the world that we are in, people make decisions based on the way that we introduce ourselves and come in contact with them. So I say all this because it is incredibly important that as a job seeker, not that we can solve all of these different equations and make every interaction perfect in that 6 to 8 seconds. That's not possible. We all know that perfection is impossible, right? But what we can do, of course, is pursue perfection. And how do we do that when we're thinking through as a job seeker? And so today we're going to break down multiple different quadrants as quickly as we possibly can so that we can break down and see how we can make a different impact. Now, the idea here is when we're done with my segment, I'm going to go interactive with everybody. So as we think through this, I want you to put it into context of some of the conversation that we're having in Discord this morning, which centers around your superpowers. What areas that you really feel are you great at? Maybe you're excellent in your writing skills. Maybe your resume is flawless and you've got it figured out and recruiters know you instantly and they know your story fully based on that. Maybe you're really great with your words. Maybe auditory is your gift. And you really do a great job of explaining not just who you were in the past, where you're at right now and why you got there. And then because of that, where you're going. Maybe that's you. Maybe your elevator pitch is perfect. Maybe you're excellent at bridging the gaps and explaining not only where you have been, but then where you're going to go with this new team. No matter where your superpower is, the goal here is to isolate that superpower and learn how do we utilize what's made us great there to help us in the uncomfortable places, which is where we might struggle. And the idea of this really centers around the idea of how do we get individuals that are going to think of us in 6 to 8 seconds to, one, want to keep reading whatever it is that we're producing for them, how we engage them enough so that they stay with us and listen to what we have to say. And then most importantly, how do we get people to lean in? How do you get somebody to want to be interested in you? How can you be curious enough to draw others to this conversation and prevent the ultimate concern of them saying, I'm out, I'm not interested, I'm going a different direction, right? And the key here is, I want you to understand, it's not about really creating a scare tactic here to say, oh, I really have to practice all this or I'll never find a job. That's not true. I think ultimately, if you practice absolutely nothing in your job search, if you do nothing, you will inevitably find a job at some point if you put forth enough effort, even in this difficult market that we have today. But it's never been our goal here at JSC. That's never been the way that I've ever taught anyone in my executive career. It's always about finding out the excellence, utilizing the excellence to help uplift everyone else, but also molding that excellence into the uncomfortable spaces where we're not great so that we can elevate ourselves, thus elevating everybody else. So the goal here in the next bit is to teach some very basics that some folks maybe didn't understand, but then we'll layer on top some more complex thoughts. So first and foremost, I think the resume scan, and this is an area that, of course, I'll have Tena lean in on when we get to the end because she is a perfectionist at this. She is the best at this. She is a person that I have relied on for a decade plus, for not just any of my executive clients' resumes, but for myself and anyone else close to me to look over and review resumes because she is purely the best at articulating in 6 to 8 seconds whether or not it conveys your story, and they can teach you how to do that. So we know this is true because in multiple different studies that track the eye movement of individuals that are recruiters as they review these resumes, they make a decision up really, truly in that 6 to 8 seconds. They know whether or not this is the right fit, right? And they're able to make a judgment call on that resume that fast, right? This is whether or not they can truly understand subconsciously, and they do this so well, the greats do, is there relevance in this individual? Can you see them clearly? Do they see clarity in who this individual is and what they're trying to accomplish? And most importantly, how do those two answer the alignment question? And the best recruiters can do that, again, in 6 to 8 seconds. If there's anything that's unclear, right, they move on. And this is one of the main reasons why we believe at JSC that if we can get your marketing materials right, if your resume speaks to your story and your story speaks to, say, your LinkedIn page, then no matter where you fall in the spectrum of an interview, it all speaks together clearly with the right direction. This is the reason why we're so confident that when you follow the process and you do it well, we see a massive intake of interviews happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks that end up becoming, of course, 4 to 5 interviews possibly every single week. We usually have to pare those down and be better about strategically planning. The reason for this is when you connect all those dots, you become visible, right? Clarity earns time. It crushes confusion. So when it can be seen from you and who you are and what you are, it unlocks, of course, someone willing to lean into you. And I want you to understand, success is not about getting yeses every single time on a resume. That's not the case. And in fact, hopefully it's written so clearly and so articulately that individuals still say no, that your time's not wasted. I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people do is the spray and pray method, right? Well, or go in and work the resumes over and over and over again to match exactly that job. That's not the case. It's not about you matching that job. It's truly about that job matching you. The key here in the 6 to 8 seconds of a resume scan is that it's so well defining you and who you are, what you are, and where you're going, that it allows the recruiter to say, ooh, I really do want to talk to this person clearly because of 5 or 6 things. That way, when you walk in and you have your 5 or 6 true, pure statements off your resume, connections are formed instantaneously, which sets you up for a better conversation strategically with the hiring leadership team. The idea here when it comes to earning that first 6 to 8 seconds in your resume is not that it's always going to be the perfect fit. No, it's so that it can be the best possible fit, clearly, directly, opening up the door for better overall conversations. And understand, this is the part of the race that's so important. You are never going to win every single race that you run. The key is for you to keep running the race so you can win as many times as you possibly can, stringing together enough of these processes so you can be successful when it comes to scanning your resume. We're going to go deeper here and some tools on that in just a moment. Now, how does this relate to, say, interviews? Interview first impressions, obviously most of us understand that the idea here is most decisions are being made in an interview in that first question. That's the reason why we spend so much time on understanding your elevator pitch. Another good conversation was had here, and I know that we have, of course, the great Charlotte Seller on the call. For those who are Discord users, know the title in there on here, where he can maybe speak a little bit more to this in a little bit. But the idea here is that you really do fine tune that 30 seconds to 90-second elevator pitch so that you earn the right in that first 6 to 8 seconds that they want to keep listening to the rest of the pitch. If you really don't intrigue or tie in or lean in to that first sentence or two, then you're not going to be able to earn the right to have the rest of the pitch even listened to. This is not just great in interviews, but we'll talk about this more in depthly later about how this works inside of networking. It's just as important. You understanding clearly that first sentence or two to give you into that 6 to 8 seconds really does unlock the door for you to be really not only accepted, but again, that lean in moment will then happen. We see this inside of Harvard and Princeton. They both did some very interesting studies here about the importance of that, but they even took it even beyond a 7-second view, right? And looked at it even at a millisecond. Most individuals make a decision of whether or not they're interested in those 6 to 7 seconds in that first overall moment that you appear. This is the reason why it is important, right, that we come in with the appearance not only matches who we are, but it matches, of course, what we should have based on the role, the title, the company the company values, how they present themselves. If you really love that company and you really want to work there, right, then you should already naturally match that look, right? That's important to understand. That if you do a good job, again, on the resume and you articulate who you are well enough, all of this flows, thus narrowing down your funnel to much more accurate, much more efficient, and giving you a better chance to win in your first impressions. This is very important when you think of transitioning from and understanding how a job search really isn't a sprint. You're going to fine tune this over time. It's the reason why interview notes are so important. We teach inside of the program, you need to write down not only everything that went really, really well, because that's your blueprint of success, but be comfortable with understanding what went wrong, because you're going to take the successes and overlay them onto those negatives. And the idea here of winning in that 6 to 7 seconds is that you cover the basic things that you need to do. You don't want to think about this as an individual judging you. It should be about a matchmaking moment. It's not a question of whether or not they can see you clearly. It's so that they can see you enough to get to the next moment so they can get to know you clearly. There's a key component there to that about building that relationship. It gets into value creation and deeper into some other conversations we can have later. The last piece of this that I really want to lean into is really the understanding of how it's so important through networking and outreach. This is a moment that in most cases when we're sending a single sentence or two at LinkedIn or even in an email is only going to be the parts that are going to be read, right? And so it's extremely important that you have the right message that, again, aligns with what your clear direction is. It's not about the perfect alignment, but it is about the perfect understanding of what you're trying to convey. So there's a difference here in understanding just putting the right words together that can be generically used over and over and over again. But it's about the percentage of understanding what works well for you based on how you want to engage with that individual. Is this a warm connection? Is this a cold connection? Is this a blind moment? Whatever it might be needs to be thoughtful and be intentional in order to capture that 6 to 8 seconds that you only have, which is only, again, in this moment, a sentence or two. So I'm not telling you to have paralysis over this moment. I'm telling you to understand the value of practicing this with a direction. We want to make sure that we utilize those few seconds that we have with each person intentionally, because we are truly curious about who they are, what they are, and why they can help us. If we're going to network with intention, network with a purpose, and understand exactly selfishly how they're going to help you, but then selfishly how you can provide something for them. If you do that well enough and you connect those dots enough, and then you bridge the conversation well enough once you're inside of it, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, then that will unlock the ability for you to be able to start to build relationships. This is how, when we turn a lot of these moments, either a loss to a lead in an interview or turn a networking warm conversation into, of course, a lead and an introduction to 1 to 2 to 3 more people. That's how we start to build, of course, the network tree and unlock moments that will make you more valuable in your networking scheme and conversations with others. Now, the biggest piece of this is now, if we've done the first group well, then it opens us up for what's called the turning point. And the turning point is really where value is created inside of an interview. And in those first few seconds of a quality answer, and this is where I think so many folks as job seekers make a mistake. When you really lean in and you know you've given a quality answer, you can see the body language, you see them writing, when you see them smiling, they've engaged, they're with you, you've got their attention. The victory is not accepting that and moving on to the next question. The victory is leaning in and creating a moment where you engage with them with a powerful question. This is extremely important. Behavioral research shows that in interviews, if you do this, if you can actually accurately twist the conversation and move it to your will, right, away from away from an interview conversation to a business conversation, this is where candidates get separated, no matter their leveling. It doesn't matter if you're brand new out of college or you're applying as a C-suite individual for the first time, or the 10-year career as a C-suite. When you twist and you change, and they all of a sudden, it goes from seeing a potential candidate, and all of a sudden they start to see a person on the team. It's when you see the path of how this interview is changing into a conversation about the success that you'll have together. That's the moment when we see really understanding that power in that 6 to 8 seconds. It's the way for you to lean in on the hard part of the conversation. Great example of this that I can think of right now would be in most cases in an interview, there's a moment where you make some form of a comment, you share some big accomplishment you did working with other parties, maybe it's an individual contributor moment where you just blew out a quota, did something great, took on an extremely hard task. No matter any of those, the key to is to ask a very powerful question, engaging them about the existing team. Think about ways to take that moment and tie it back into maybe the reason why there was an opening, right? And we go really deep into this in our different training, and I wish I had more time to go through each and every single example. But whether you're in a one-on-one with myself or Tina, or you're in, of course, our interview, our workshops, there is some great quality questions that allow you to take it, depending on the stage, it takes you much more in depth to set you up for the next conversation. This is oftentimes the way that it solves for most individuals who end up coming in second place. If you've ever felt like you keep getting to the end and you can't get across the finish line, it's normally it comes down to this. Did you convince the hiring committee through a series of powerful questions that you were the absolute best fit overall? So here's where I want to kind of pull this all together. Those 6 to 8 seconds are the most important moments at every single stage. That's true. Resume, your opening statement, your messaging, your interview questions, all of that. And not everyone struggles in the exact same space. Some of you, again, like I said, do a great job at articulating yourself on paper, but maybe you get uncomfortable verbally. Maybe some of you have really strong conversational skills. Again, verbally, you just can knock it out of the park, but then maybe you struggle with the confidence of actually doing the outreach, or you don't have a strategy for it. No matter where you are in that process, again, the goal here isn't perfection at all of them. The goal is awareness. The real success in any job search isn't winning every single moment. It's truly staying faithful to the process when the results might lag behind the overall effort. What this really builds is the confidence that will last well beyond your single next job offer. It's amazing to me how many individuals that land their next big job, once they're into it, they see really quickly that everything that we're discussing, every part of the dynamic training that is JSC Careers program flows into this so that they become an impact player. They're just rinse, wash, repeating the exact same skills they're teaching inside of their role, and outside, when they come out of that 90 days, they truly are an impact player because they have a full understanding of how they fit and the different areas that they're leaning in, their strengths, their superpowers, and then using those on top of some of those weaknesses. So really, as I go to wrap up this concept, I want you to really understand that this, like I'm saying, it doesn't stop with resumes and interviews. The same simple principles apply everywhere in life. Short-term comforts truly do fade, and long-term discipline always compounds. It doesn't matter if we're thinking about the 28-day challenge with your health, with relationships, with leadership, your own and others. It doesn't matter if it's just personal growth. Maybe you're working on projects at your house, right? It doesn't really matter what it is that you're doing. Your job status will never define the trajectory of your life, but your daily decisions do. So this goes right back in the idea of making clear, conscious choices to get better. And that's what really, truly matters when I think about what this community can do for everyone. And that is, this community can be the reminder, the accountability partner that we choose every single day, the direction that's going to move us forward. So as I wrap this up and we go to really I want you all to kind of sit with you as we move throughout this week is, will you work on your 6 to 8 seconds? Will you redefine the part of the process that maybe hasn't been that strong? Will you stop trying to do everything and start focusing on what really matters most right at this moment for you? Doing more doesn't always mean you work harder, and I think that's so lost. Most of the time, it truly just means be more strategic. So when clarity starts to show up from you from being more strategic, the momentum typically is right behind it. And Monday is the day that I love. And this is why Mindset Monday resonates with me. This is why I message everybody as much as I possibly can. I block most of my calendar in the morning for this, is because I truly believe that if we all can stay focused and we can just get our days started with that directive motion, this is where you'll get the most attention from others, where you'll create the most value, and where your momentum will truly begin. It's not about winning the sprint, but it's truly about winning the marathon. It's about beating frustration. It's about being intentional. And I think that's where I'm most excited about, where I see not just the individuals on this call, but I think the whole entire group of us together are committed to that. And I hope that for you, and we go into some questions here in a second, that we all understand the value of staying very focused in that 6 to 8 seconds, not because it's good for us, but because it will unlock everything we want to know about that company and about the interview, the networking moment, and is this the right place for us to be? And how do we utilize this moment to not just better ourselves, but better everybody else around us, to become a more efficient and better job seeker and impact player? All right.